So what should you expect if the MiG-25 gets added to War Thunder? As you know, the MiG-25 is one of my favorite aircraft of all time. It's such an iconic icon, basically, of the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And of course, it has this whole myth behind it. I already did a lot of videos about it. And of course, even BVVD said that there are plans of adding the aircraft to the game. So let's talk about what you should expect from it if it gets added. Let's divide into performance, sensors, weapons, and then countermeasures. And how good would it actually be like? So in the performance side of things, which is probably the main thing that everybody talks about, it is going to be a fast aircraft, right? I think, in my opinion, that it should be the PD or PDS models, not the early P models. So probably just because of the sake of performance, to have the better missiles, the better radar and everything, and even countermeasures, which is something that the earlier ones from the very late 60s didn't have, right? And it would be an extremely fast aircraft, the fastest aircraft in the game, I think, and one of the worst in turning capability as well. Although it had around 200 kilonewtons of total thrust static, it had around 20 tons empty, so it was really heavy due to being very large and being made out of metal. Normal metal, I mean, not like titanium or anything like that. They actually used a normal steel. I mean, it's not normal steel, but you got the idea, right? It had a rate of climb of around 200 meters per second, so you would have a pretty amazing acceleration and rate of climb for the time, and an amazing top speed. That's the main thing. I mean, the acceleration would probably be pretty good. I don't think it would be that amazing because of the heavy weight, but it's still pretty alright, right? But with the downside of being really bad at turning, right? The safety limits in the turning capability were really low, up to like 4.5 or down to 4.5 Gs, right? So this jet wasn't made to make any dogfight. Since in War Thunder, we are normally pushing the limits a little bit to the maximum structural capability of some of these aircraft, probably the max G would be the structural limit of the actual aircraft, which was around 11 Gs. Even once, I think they pulled 11.5 Gs, but they banned the aircraft. So it could turn more, but, the safety limit was pretty low because it was not meant to be doing dogfights. In the game, we will probably see a 10, 11 G max G limit, but remember, in the higher airspeeds that this thing flies, these Gs are very easily reached, right? So just because it will be able to maybe pull 8, 9 Gs, it doesn't mean that it will do the same type of 9G turn that an F-16 can do, okay? In terms of max speed and the controversy behind it, the safety limit was Mach 2.83, around 3,000 kilometers per hour at higher altitudes and around 1,300 kilometers per hour in the lower altitudes, right? But these are safety limits. Let's take a look on the actual thing in real life. The aircraft could obviously do more. Like any other aircraft in the game, it will push a little bit of the limits of the real life limits that we see, right? With some things to consider. For example, they broke most of the records that you see, Mach 3.2 or something like that you might see eventually here and there, with the R model, which was the reconnaissance model, or later the RB with the bomber version, right? So normally they would go above Mach 3 with those variants. The Ps, they were heavier, so normally they're not too prone to actually reaching those Mach 3 plus speeds, right? Although it's kind of funny, but although some people think the limit of these speeds were due to engine overheating and everything, the main problem was not the engine itself. The engine was actually fine with it. The main problem was actually the canopy started to melt with the friction of the air. The fuselage was getting so hot that the fuel tanks got up to like 300 degrees Celsius, right? So it's just like, it's too hot. The aircraft became too hot, and especially because of the paint and the materials that they were made of, the aircraft could not handle, like, even if it had, like, the engines could handle, it couldn't, go past too much Mach 3 just because of that. It could get up to like Mach 2.83 very easily, but above that, things start to become a problem with temperature. That's why they decided to put this limit of 2.83. So Normally, it wouldn't go above Mach 3, but in the game, you should expect the maximum speed where the red line appears to be Mach 2.83. But in a dive, maybe, or certain situations, it could probably get higher than that, right? Of course, it will depend very much on the payload as well. Don't expect to get to the Mach 3 plus speeds, of course, with 4 R-40 missiles, right? In the lower altitudes as well, the 1400 kilometers per hour was reached. I think they got even to like 1470 kilometers per hour before the aircraft started to do some weird stuff. So in a general sense, the safety limit was 1300 kilometers per hour in lower airspeeds, but it can get faster, which means in the game we'll probably see like red limiter of 1300 and then the actual braking of the aircraft at the 1400s or something like that in the game. Again, I mean, just remember that they normally did these tests with the R model, not the P model. So this would be the aircraft. Very fast, okay acceleration, amazing climb speed for the time, but no turn. That's the major thing. Very heavy, very big aircraft, very easy to kill in a dogfight, okay? The sensors, I mean, obviously it was an interceptor. It was not made to be dogfighting. It was meant to get in, fire the missiles, and get out. That's the main idea, okay? So for the sensors, it had 2 sensors with the PD and PDS models. The first one was the main radar, the RP25MN, so upgraded over these merged older radars, very different from those radars. It was upgraded with the technology used on the MiG-23ML's radar, so a radar that we already know and love, so the technology is pretty much the same, okay? The upgrade happened in the mid-70s, so the max range for like a Tu-16, a bomber-sized aircraft, for the search detection would be 110 kilometers, so a very, very large target. The tracking would be around 80 kilometers. So this would be the max range for the largest target you can see in the horizon. For a MiG-21 sized target, so a very small target, it would be 70 for search, 50 to 60 for tracking. So an F-14 would be, I don't know, 100. MiG-21, 70 for search, you know, for not for the tracking, but you get the idea. Of an F4 would be 80, 90 maybe, something like that. So it depends on the size of the target, RCS, stuff like that. But it would be around 70 to 110 for the search and 50 to 80 on tracking, depending on the size of the target, okay? Look down was around 20 to 30 kilometers. He had within visual range modes and MTI feature, okay? So the normal short range, you know, dogfighting modes of the radar, and it has the MTI for looking down, okay? And then he has the TP26SH IRST, the main infrared search and track. Normally had a max range of 45 kilometers in an unknown aspect for a bomber, okay? So I couldn't find exactly if it was a cold or hot aspect. Of course, that changes a lot on the range of the IRST. Probably a cold aspect, 45, 50 kilometers. I heard that, for example, for the SR-71, these IRSTs and stuff could reach 100, like 150 kilometers because of how much heat the SR-71 was actually producing. So it depends on the target, you know, it depends on the target. It didn't have a ranging solution, just like the MiG-23 will not show range, it will just show where the target is, okay? And then we go for the weapons. Main thing, no gun, okay? Doesn't have a gun, unfortunately, but yeah. And then it has the main missiles, the R-40s. In the PD or PDS models, remember the PD is the main version. The PDS is just an upgrade over the Ps that were already produced. So they picked the Ps and upgraded to PD standard, but the PD is the main version, okay? That was produced new. R-40 RDs would be the main missile. Large, very large, but effective missile, especially against large targets. Same tech from the R-24R, so they basically made a very big MiG-23 that cannot turn and go very fast, right? So a pretty good missile in regards to tracking, right? The max range was around 60 kilometers with around 15 Gs of turn, although some sources claim the 24 Gs of the R-24 as well. Since it's a heavier missile, it probably was around 15 Gs, or around there, I mean, in general, right? A very fast and long-range missile for the time, but with destroying bombers in mind, you know, it was built for destroying bombers. It had a massive 55 kilogram warhead, almost 5 times the amount of the R-24. So it was a very substantial amount of weight. It was more than the Phoenix even. The Phoenix was around 47. I don't know in HE and TNT equivalent, but in pure weight, it was more than even the Phoenix. So it's a very large missile that had a very long range idea of just exploding with a massive air fireball, you know, around the target. So it will not turn as much as the R-24, but it doesn't need to hit like the R-24 has, you know. Just goes in the general direction and it will explode a very massive fireball, right? And of course you had the R40TD, the IR version with all aspect seeker and the same performance more or less to the RD. So 50km max range with IR, some form of IR CCM and an all aspect seeker, kind of like that. Of course you could also take the R60s and R60Ms. Probably the M would be used in the game for dogfighting situations, right? And then we talk about the countermeasures. He had some level of ECCM, of ignoring chaff, just like the MiG-23 had, you know, so he could ignore a little bit of chaff just like he had in the game if the target is flying towards you, for example, or even away from you if it's a fast enough speed. So yeah, he could ignore a little bit of chaff, but of course it's not gonna be like an Eurofighter Typhoon Raider, but he has some capabilities like the MiG-23 has right now in the game, right? And it has the same countermeasure pod, quote unquote, of the MiG-23, so it has 60 flares and chaff countermeasures with the small type. Remember, this thing produces more, you know, heat than the sun, right? So it will be, although there are the flares and chaff, it will be very easy to kill this thing with an IR missile if you have within the range of the missile, right? So yeah, so how good would it actually be? Like, what BR could this thing be? Well, to be honest, it depends very much on the version, but if it is the versions that we're talking about here, I think it's gonna be a okay aircraft. What I mean is that in the right hands it can do good, but it cannot clutch a match probably, and it will probably just keep running and trying to make sure that you have the missiles to fire and keep people by surprise by a lot of the time. So it will be an aircraft that will be very hard to fly, and for the majority of the people in the game, at least 50% of the people in the game will find it not good enough to fly, and it will probably be just an aircraft that not a lot of people fly eventually. Of course, when it gets at it, yes, but eventually not a lot of people will fly it, just like the F-117 sometimes, because it's just a very hard aircraft to fly sometimes, you know. But with the correct, you know, flight path in mind and with the correct idea, it can do well. But you have to have in mind that you need to have the missiles, you need to have the speed to stay alive, and even then you can get killed by a BVR missile very easily depending on the BR. So the BR of the thing, I don't know. I have a feeling that 11.7, 11.3, it's somewhat there. 11.0 maybe. The BR will be probably around there, between the MiG-23M and the MLD in BR. I don't think higher will be something that it will be good enough, because, you know, players will just have troubles dealing with very low missile count, a hard radar to use sometimes, and of course the lack of a dogfighting capability. Majority of the people rely on dogfights at these BRs to get kills, so it will be mainly a BVR weapon with getting people by surprise. So I think the aircraft can be good in the right hands, but not more than good, and you're not gonna get aces or anything like that, and the BR should be around 11.0 to 11.7 in my opinion, okay? But basically this is it. This is what you should expect from the mighty MiG-25. It's an aircraft that is gonna be hard but fun to have in the game, and I mean, it's just too iconic to not have added, right? I see you guys on the next one. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and bye guys, see ya.